for joining us today. Today we have Edgar Villa, Executive Director of Crossroads Recovery Center, joining us. Today we're going to talk about the recovery process. Edgar, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me today.
So today we're going to go into the recovery process, and there are several stages in the recovery process, which include kind of the pre-contemplation stage is the first, not necessarily stage of recovery, but I guess the first stage in the process leading up to recovery. Is that right, Edgar?
One of the questions that I get a lot is, what does recovery look like? What do we do in treatment? What does our clients do? What does the family do? So I want to let you know that recovery entails many things. Not only does it entail the client, but also the family. So it's giving everyone a roadmap of what to expect. Everyone's a little bit different, so everyone's going to do something unique in this process. However, it has to be done in unison, because what we know is, and research says, that you could have a client for 6 months in treatment, and if we send them back to the same family dynamic, in 6 days, it's going to undo 6 months worth of work. So it's really important to understand the recovery process, what it looks like, just because I think it's a good roadmap to have. What's going to happen biologically, psychologically, socially, spiritually also, what to expect. I think it's important to understand that, and today we're going to actually cover that today.
Sounds great. Sounds great. So back to kind of the stages or the steps of recovery. Again, I know that it's different for every individual. So the pre-contemplation stage, can you tell me what that entails exactly?
Yes. This is the part where I typically get a client referred to me that says, I don't know why I'm here. They sent me here. My family says I have a problem, but I don't agree with them. So the pre-contemplation is just a nice way of saying, I don't have a problem. I don't need anything. It's when the individual does not see the consequences of their behavior, which is the using behavior. So that's kind of the first thing. I actually had a few clients, actually most of my clients come in. Now, I don't think I've had many clients that come into treatment and say, Edgar, I want help for this. Typically, they were either made by someone, either by the courts or informally by a spouse saying, you better go get help or you're not going to allow to be at the home, or a adolescent or a son being said, one of the requirements for you to come back home with us is you got to go to treatment. So either way, sometimes we kind of have to be forced to come into treatment. Not necessarily is all the case. And one thing I do want to add to a lot of family members out there is understand this: whether your son, daughter, husband, wife, grandparents comes into treatment, studies have shown it does not matter or significant difference why they're there. If they're on their own cognitions or if they're forced there, outcome studies show that there's not a huge difference in results. If someone comes on their own or someone is actually told, you got to finish this or you're going to go to jail or you're not be able to go into the home. So just know that regardless of what gets them in there, that's an important part of that process.
That's interesting. So regardless of how they got there, it's still their odds of being successful in the recovery is about the same.
It's about the same. You would think that someone comes in a very positive. I've had clients that come in, Edgar, I really want this. I make a difference. I'm hitting my rock bottom. And all of a sudden, they don't come back after a month for X, Y reasons. I have clients that say, I don't want this. I don't want any part of this. I don't want to be here. And then they finish the program. So it's really interesting how this dynamic works. And it's really good for the family members to know, and also the clients or people that have some form of addiction to understand what is my life going to look like? What is recovery going to entail for me? Even though it's going to be customized, what to expect and the major steps I need to take in order for me to move on and be able to put this disease of addiction in remission.
Right, so after the pre-contemplation stage where the individual kind of realizes, okay, you know what, I had time to think about it and I've actually accepted that I do have a problem. So then what happens once the individual realizes I have a problem?
Then they have to go through withdrawals. They will have to go not only through physical withdrawals, also psychological withdrawals, is understanding that the individuals that have an addiction, they have an intimate relationship with their drug. It's just like their best friend. It lives in their brain. It releases chemicals, makes them feel good. So one thing is that the grieving process of letting go of this intimate relationship. They've been there through the thick and thin. And sometimes when we don't have an addiction, we haven't had that experience, it's really difficult to understand what is it, why is it that there is such an emotional connection to this drug. Some people cry. Some people you have them write goodbye letters, and they have difficulty writing the goodbye letters to them. It's just a very intimate, close relationship they have. So one of the things they have to go is through the withdrawals, and through the withdrawals, you can experience many things. You can experience some craving, some depression, some exhaustion, insomnia. You can experience some memory problems, hunger problems, appetite. You're gonna tremors, body shakes. So it's not common that a lot of individuals want to continue their using because they want to avoid, and sometimes it gets to the point that some individuals that are coming in are just coming in because they want to stop the physical aspects of the withdrawal. So they will need to come in into our detoxification program or a detoxification program within their community.
Interesting. Okay. So the withdrawal stages is the detox process. And is that the withdrawal stage, do they go through that with any kind of alcohol or drug? Is that something that's common regardless of what they're using?
Yes. Now, every drug has different withdrawals, and we're actually going to have a whole segment. I want to educate individuals of what to expect and withdrawal symptoms, so you can see if your loved one is actually withdrawing or not, and what the complications are. But generally speaking, yes, most drugs have a withdrawal syndrome or a cluster of different symptoms, which usually is irritability. If someone uses meth, for example, they might go to sleep for hours, days at a time, sometimes wake up, eat, whatnot. If someone has going through opiate withdrawals, they might have constipation problems, shaking. So there's a lot of things, different symptoms for different drugs that they might be using. And you even might not be aware of this, or maybe like community might not be aware of this, but also when you're gambling, you have withdrawals. You have physical withdrawals when you stop gambling.
Wow.
Well, recently, and something that's been added is in the DSM-5, which is the Knox Manual for Psychiatric Illnesses, and it actually added that gambling into substance use disorder. So we know that there is physical withdrawals.
Wow, that's interesting. So I guess we'll have to have another segment on gambling and and the effects of that. Okay, so once the individual realizes that they want to get help, so then there's different avenues that they could go to get help, right? There's different options as it relates to the individual. Yeah,
and there's different options. There's different level of care depending on the level of need. And we've touched a little bit on this, but I do want to elaborate a little bit more today. Is that one of the first stages typically for a lot of individuals is an assessment. And then in the assessment, we would ask questions as far as level of using, how long, quantity, frequency, duration, and so on to link them to appropriate level of care. And some individuals will go into detoxification services first, and then they would move on either to residential care where they live there 24/7, or maybe intensive outpatient or an outpatient services where they work, go to treatment 3, 4, 5 times a week. So it would vary for individuals. But yeah, the first stage is getting over that initial, what we call denial, that there's a problem.
So, and then once they get help, I know you talked about detoxification, inpatient, outpatient, and then the 12-step program, that's also part of a way that they could seek to get help?
Yes, think of this way, that a recovery program entails social support. Because one of the things we try to teach is recovery is something that you do on your own, what you can't do by yourself. And it seems kind of a difficult part to understand is we need support, whether through 12-step meetings, whether through Celebrate Recovery. So think of 12-step meetings, and that's going to be another segment that we're going to have. However, think of 12-step meetings as a way for individuals to go get support for individuals that have been going through it, get some type of sponsorship, someone that is going to take them, for lack of better words, under their wings and kind of guide them through this recovery process, what to expect in the 12-step model.
Okay, so then that kind of connects to gathering support, because the individuals are going to need support not only from the community as it relates to, say, a 12-step program or group therapy or something like that, but also from loved ones, right?
Yes, so think of it this way, think of recovery as a biological, psychological, social, and also kind of spiritual, holistic approach all in unison together. And there's some criticism where it says, well, that will separate biology with psychology, where they're all the brain and psychology together. And yes, they're together, but in order for us to kind of break them apart to help the clients understand, that's how we kind of educate them that it's a biopsychosocial, spiritual model for them, and we call it a recovery grid, where they kind of take a personal inventory of their deficits and area of strengths and where they want to go and develop this.
That's interesting. Okay, so now I want to kind of step back. So the biological part that you're talking about in the recovery process, that would be kind of what you talked about with the detoxification process and what their body goes through as far as withdrawal symptoms?
Yes.
And then the social segment, so that's going to fall into their support group, whether that's the 12-step meetings, the group therapy, the families, the friends, whoever's really supporting them?
Yes, working, a part of it also. That's all combined. And some of these areas are intertwined with each other. Some of them could be spiritual and based, say someone going to church. That also encompasses their social aspect of it. Sometimes working, having social thing also encompasses maybe their psychological aspect of it. So this is not, if you work on one, all of them get affected because we're all together. We're all one unit, and whatever we do for one section, the other section is actually going to be somehow affected in a very positive way or in a very negative way. And interesting, I have had a lot of clients that come in, especially there's one client that says, well, I am in recovery. And he says, well, I'm great. So, how long have you been in recovery for? He's I've recovered for at least a year. I'm like, okay, well, tell me about your recovery program. He's like, well, what do you mean my recovery program? Well, what have you been doing to stay sober? He's like, not been drinking. And one thing to understand is that there's a difference between staying sober and being in recovery. Staying sober, not drinking alcohol or consuming other drugs is a prerequisite into entering recovery. Because what we know is if you stay sober, you're still going to have what we call sobriety-based symptoms, which means you might be acting, thinking, doing the same things you were doing or she was doing when they were actually using. So the only thing that's been different is I'm not drinking, but the person still having a lot of conflicts at home, the person still eating unhealthy, up hours all the night, has a very very negative outlook toward things. So that's what we're looking at is one of the things you first need to do is be sober and to enter recovery process.
That's interesting, and I think a lot of people that are watching are going to have that same feeling, because when you think of the recovery process, I agree. I think a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm sober, so that's the end of that. I got rid of my, stopped using my drugs, stopped drinking, and I'm in recovery. But I like the way that you said that, especially as it relates to kind of the psychological needs. So then the person can at times still take over those same symptoms or behaviors that they were doing when they were using.
Yes, think about it this way. We say you have a loved one that has diabetes. She says, I'm not going to sugar no more. I'm cured. Does that make sense? No, she's going to have to, or he's going to have to do things in order to heal themselves.
Right.
So that it goes far beyond just stopping that or consuming that is what is considered harmful for us, whatever type of drug or alcohol it might be. So that's one way to look at it is just in order to enter the recovery process, we first have to stop using the alcohol or other drugs.
And I kind of want to, before we get into really what maintaining sobriety looks like and building their kind of action stage towards improving their life, before we get into that, I did want to touch on recovery beliefs, because you and I spoke earlier and we were talking about recovery beliefs, and there's a lot of things, kind of how you were talking about as people believe recovery, what it looks like. So can you tell me a little bit about recovery beliefs and what people believe that is maybe not true or what they don't know to be true?
One of the things is first define what beliefs are, and belief usually is your framework, the way you view the world, your lessons of the world. That's your belief system. And what happens is some of our beliefs are very healthy for us, some of them are very distorted, which means we don't really see the things that the way they are. And what happens is a lot of individuals believe that recovery is simply stop using alcohol or drugs. That's a common belief. And if people believe that, guess what? They're not going to make any other changes in their life. Another belief in recovery is that relapse just happens spontaneously without any warning signs. All of a sudden, I landed on a needle. All of a sudden, the beer just landed in my mouth, and I drank. But no, actually, when it comes to recovery, you start learning that relapse is a process. There is behaviors, attitudes, thinking patterns that go along in this process that actually you're going towards a relapse, towards using. And so that's another misbelief that a lot of individuals believe that that all of a sudden I just relapse. But in reality, there isn't. There is warning signs. And so that's kind of the things that we're talking about when it comes to belief systems. If you believe that for example, if you believe that addiction is just a moral bad behavior and doesn't need any more treatment, we just need to just stop doing it. And then there's a lot of cultures that believe that, all you gotta do is just stop it and it's okay. But in reality, it's not that. In the brain has changed so much that it's not just about saying stop it. You actually don't have control over the thoughts that come into your brain, the cravings that come into your brain. You don't have no control over that. And people have difficulty understanding that. It's like if I ask you, don't think of a pink elephant. And the first thing is going to come up. And especially think about a loved one that has passed away, that sometimes you're grieving and it's coming back into your brain, what they wanted to. It's kind of the same thing. When you stop using, you're grieving that. Your brain craves that. The brain wants it. And one thing, misconception is that, you want the drug, you have a craving, so you must want to use. And that's a huge no-no, where when someone has a craving, it does not mean the person wants to use. A craving is just a little indicator that something's wrong, that your brain wants more dopamine. That's all it is. It's nothing more than some biological response that your brain has that initiates some electrical impulse, and then your body changes to want to have that, or that dopamine, but doesn't mean you want to use. That's all the big misconception people have about cravings. And then there's a shame talking about craving or urges when people don't realize that it's a natural occurring process. It doesn't need anything more or less. It just gives you a little warning sign.
It's just the thought that people have, but whether or not they act on it, that's gonna be up to them, right? So I like that you said that there shouldn't be any shame in these cravings, because it's common, especially with people in recovery, that they're going to have this regardless of how long they've been in sobriety, correct? And I want to talk about maintaining their sobriety. So once they've entered into these programs and they've got the help, and what next? What's next in the recovery process?
Well, once they come into treatment and the recovery, then we start building their educational foundation. We start providing them with information so they can start making some lifestyle changes. Because stopping the alcohol or drugs is just the first step. The next step is actually for them to become aware of, these are the things I have to change. I have to eat healthy. I have to sleep from 10 o'clock, wake up at 7 o'clock. We have to exercise. We have to get more education as far as what my triggers, cravings are. So now what you're doing is you're preparing them with all the skills necessary, the knowledge necessary, in order for them to move forward in their recovery process. And that's where they will go on to next, is that part of information that's going to help them and give them the skills to be able to move to the next phase of recovery. And usually there's not a set standard for how long some person is going to last in this stage or in the other, but there is some form of biological kind of stages that people go to in the brain where it's making these shifts.
Okay, so once they've established that education and they start to realize kind of what their triggers are, what their cravings are, or how you said, how to, I guess, avoid that situation, because there is something that's leading them up to it. Doesn't just slip happen and, I started drinking or started using this drug, right? So then once they have this education, you start to, part of the recovery process is them leading their normal life, or what now?
Well, I guess I want to comment on this. Is once it was the withdrawals, right, and which is within 2 weeks, 7 weeks, and depending on the drug, sometimes you have a protracted withdrawal, which simply means that you might have a withdrawal 2 weeks, 3 weeks later down the road. But one of the things we want to look at also is that after typically 2 weeks of this recovery process, they go through the honeymoon period. Is this honeymoon period where they have increased energy and optimism. It's because the brain's dopamine has been down here that the brain all of a sudden says, I need to shoot more up there, more dopamine, more serotonin, so boom, it's up here. So you see a lot of individuals like in the third week calling their family members, you know what, I am feeling better, I could do this, I don't think I need your help anymore, thank you very much. And this is usually where treatment centers only last 9 days, is when individuals actually leave the program with the family members are really happy. Oh, my son, my daughter is so changed. She's wonderful. Everything's just great. But this is just another stage they have to go through. And through that stage, they have overconfidence. They think they could handle anything on their own. And it's a great thing to have confidence. Overconfidence will put those individuals in a high-risk situation. And when I mean high-risk situation, it means a situation where it's going to ignite this desire or this thought, I want to go use. That's what high-risk situations are. So they're overconfident. They think I could handle having money in my pocket. I could be around people that are using because I feel so good. And then they do. They say no to these situations. However, they don't know that after the honeymoon period, there's another problem that happens, and they continue this behavior, and they might relapse because they're not feeling as well as before. And that's what we have to look at, is the brain is making the shifts, and it's really important for them to understand, yes, you feel great now, and not to be negative, but say, but be prepared, because the next stage of your recovery process is not going to be so positive. It's not going to be so with energy. It's not going to be, and this is a great time during the honeymoon period where individuals in recovery, it's good to start getting them into some type of recreational activity because they have the energy, some type of workout routine because they have the energy. So that way when they go to the next stage, they're actually feeling better about themselves. They have the energy and they have already the behavior structure, the habit of them going and working out. Because we know when they get tired, a good thing for them is to work out, do some aerobics, eat healthier, do social connections. That's going to help them through this recovery process.
And then once they're through kind of the honeymoon process, and you said they're going to start to develop these healthier habits, eating and recreational activities, is this also kind of a good time that the spiritual aspect is introduced?
Yes, the introduction of a spiritual aspect is introduced early on into the recovery process. And yes, it's really important to have them. But remember, also in this honeymoon period, there's also a downfall to it. They're also having mood swings, they're having difficulty sleeping, they're still having other things, but it's not as bad as the withdrawal phase. So yes, to answer your question, it's really great in this honeymoon period to introduce them to different forms of activities because they actually have the physical energy at that time. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so now that they're developing these healthier eating habits and they're working out, and is this a good time for the individual to go back to their job, go back to things as normal, or what happens next in recovery?
You know what? I'm glad you brought that up because no, this is not a good time for them actually to go back to their work. Because remember, they're only 21 days into their sobriety.
Right.
When this is a recovery, and what we know is that if there's a high stress level, the odds of them getting cravings and going back to old behaviors because they haven't learned the skills, it increases the odds of them relapsing. So this not might be the best time to go back to work, but it's the best time to start using or incorporating healthier coping behaviors for their cravings or for their urges. So that way when they go into the next stage, they have this positive outlet, or this what we call positive outlet is behaviors that actually brings them some form of relief, but at the same time, it's healthy and no long-term consequences.
Okay. So during this kind of period that they're developing, I don't want to say kind of who they are, but I guess their new identity as it relates to what their life is going to look like, their sober life going forward. Also, is it common for relapses to happen? And can you tell me too, recovery, does that mean I'm never drinking ever again? Is that like 100% that then I'm in recovery, or what does that look like?
Well, I get that question a lot, is can I drink?
Right.
From a person that's what brought them into treatment. It's kind of rewarding yourself with something that's actually taking away your life. Can I give it's like saying, and I keep going back to this because I really want to be able to let everyone know that this is a disease, and I compare it to diabetes, I compare it to a lot of other conditions, but it's like saying to a diabetic, well, now that your sugar's okay managed, you go ahead and get yourself a chocolate. And that's not what we really want to do. So that's right. I see a lot of individuals that, yeah, I understand that, Edgar. I know it's a disease. I know it's treatable. But it's just intellectual. So at the 20, when I mean intellectual, it's just living here. They haven't internalized it. Well, when we mean internalized, it means that they're not living it. It's not part of them. They haven't completely accepted unconditionally, or what other individuals call it, they haven't surrendered, accepted that this is a way of life. Mm-hmm. This is not a crash diet where I'll do this for a month, get better, and then go back to my old behaviors and expect same or different results. And no, this is something that what we recommend is for them to, if possible, to continue sobriety, abstinence completely forever. Just because some individuals, we realize that some individuals that come into the treatment center, they have a severe problem with alcohol and drugs, and they just won't be able to go back to it. Some individuals might go back, drink here and there, and nothing bad happens. But it's really, do you really want to gamble? So we always promote complete abstinence if possible, because we know that that's going to increase your odds of succeeding longer term in life. We also do recommend for them to stop smoking, because what we know is one of the things they pick up before the alcohol and drugs is a cigarette, and that's the first indicator there's a lot of stress going on. So these little protective factors that we try to put into place for them to actually realize, okay, these are warning signs for me.
Okay, right. And then I would imagine too, especially with the smoking, it's kind of like replacing one addiction with another, because then they're developing this nicotine addiction, right?
What tends to happen a lot is, an interesting point you bring up is, it's very common for your loved one to actually go from stop using meth into eating a lot and then gaining 20, 30 pounds. It could be very simple that a man could stop using cocaine or alcohol and then switch that over to having a lot of sex, uncontrollable sex. So, or it could be maybe from alcohol drinking to gambling. So what happens is, it's very common for the individual to switch one drug for another unhealthy habit. It's very common. That's what we're trying to, in the honeymoon stage, we try to incorporate healthier habits with non-long-term consequences, because we know that the brain's going to want to search for something to make it feel better.
Interesting. So then that's when, like you said, you really encourage them to start eating better and start working out and doing some kind of activity, a social activity also.
Yes.
Okay.
And I actually have a client, an interesting client is, he's been using for 20-something plus years, and his family knows the recovery process. It just, for some reason, he can't stay sober more than 2 months. And unfortunately for him, there's also what we call dual diagnosed clients that not only have a substance abuse but also have a mental health issue. And what this client is, for a long time, the mental health issue was never being treated. So he would get depressed. So after the honeymoon page, we jump to what's called the wall. And the wall is that they actually have anger, more depression, they have family adjustment, isolation. There's a lot of things that happen in this wall. And for him, the wall was a severe case of really feeling depressed, more so than someone typically you would discuss, but he was against medication. And so one of the things we have to look at is some clients during this stage, you start noticing, okay, this client is really depressed more than the common norm, and person needs antidepressants, maybe something else, a mood stabilizer, and now he's been sober for a few years. And not because he gave himself enough time to stay sober to realize what is going on with him, and he was able to realize that, and it kind of helped him along the way. So not only the recovery process entails staying sober, but also finding out what your brain needs. For him was an antidepressant medication that could help him so he wouldn't reach the lower levels.
So he wouldn't go back to using. So that's interesting. I like the way you said that, because then he's going to have to, he or she, whoever that person is going to have to maintain their sobriety long enough to really see, I guess, the triggers or what's causing that, and to really kind of fix whatever's going on in their life that's urging them towards the addiction.
And I'm not saying that everyone needs to be on medication.
Right.
What I'm saying, during this wall stage, there's a lot of emotional distress, a lot not thinking clearly, difficulty sleeping sometimes. But what we're saying is, it's always beneficial for them to stay sober for quite a while, so we could understand what's the cause here and get them linked to services, psychiatrists, that's going to help them in this process.
And Edgar, when they hit the wall, is that usually when they're still in rehabilitation? Like, are they still inpatient at that point, or is it always going to depend on the individual? Can they be home at that time?
They could be home, and most of the time in treatments now, especially because of the way mandated managed care is, there's only paid 29 days, and they go into outpatient services. Is that the unfortunate what happens is a lot of clients do 29 days, and they're like, I'm feeling better because of the honeymoon stage, and they're just starting into the wall, and then they go home. Sometimes they're at home when this happens, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But yes, sometimes they say, I don't need any treatment, and that's it. And that's the unfortunate part. But most of them will transition out from residential to outpatient services. And that's where you start seeing the problems. And then when they go, they're usually living home at this point. So remember, not only are they going home to the same relationships they were before possibly, but now they're going through this wall, which all these symptoms are going on, and the family's now saying, they didn't teach you anything there.
Right.
You know, you're the same person that came in, you know, that, so one of the things you look at is, for families, it's important for them also, family also go through this transition of recovery, and a lot of family members don't recognize that this is just transition, something they're going to go through. This is where a lot of individuals in recovery are really depressed, really angry, can't see the positive thing, they're feeling hopeless. It's because they've done so much, so well for quite a time, and now they're just waiting on everything else to kind of work out. If they're getting in the routine of doing things, that could get boring, that could, you know, get depressing. Now you add the biological aspect of the brain is healing itself. That's another component to this, and so it's really helping to understand is that during the wall, it's possible that a lot of them just actually start getting a little bit more cravings. You use the routine because they're feeling more fatigue, lack of energy, and they're like, well, I'm not going to my meeting today, I'm not going to call my sponsor today, I'm not going to go to the outpatient today, I'm feeling tired, I'm just going to sleep in. And so really help understand, the family has to know, the client has to know that this is normal, you have to push through this. That's what's really important when we talk about having an IOP, that they could pick you up and drop you off, because they're going to force you to come in, come back, and it's going to help you to go through that process.
And I think that's a common misbelief, because people think that once the individual is back from recovery, you know, we just spent all this money, or you just went to this treatment and I thought you were cured, I thought you were better. So I think it's important too, like you said, like you guys do at Crossroads, I know, educating the family on what's going to happen once they're home. Just because they're home and they're sober, it doesn't stop there.
Mm-hmm. And the interesting part about, yes, and then one thing to understand also with this is, as a family, and also going to see with their loved ones that have an addiction, is that at this point, when we call the wall, the brain seemingly, or sometimes the clients unknowingly, is going to try to justify another use, another last run, or something just very minor, because the brain's going to, it's going to try to get you to do certain things, because that's where the brain is at the moment. The brain is desiring that one thing, that one drug that gave it that nice jump, that push, that dopamine, the feeling good in the brain. So it's really careful that our family members that's what they're going to go through. Mm-hmm.
And do you have any kind of, I guess, advice or suggestions for the family members that they see that kind of happening, or that person leading towards that?
One of the things is the family members encourage them, go with them to meetings, because sometimes what happens is they have meetings where you could go through an Al-Anon family meeting, and you also could go through a 12-step meeting for your family members. So be part of the recovery process. Know the symptoms, know the behaviors, get yourself educated through the treatment center, because most treatment centers now, it's kind of a standard practice care where the family members also get education. So if you have someone understand what the stages are, understand that the person can go through the withdrawal stage and what it looks like for the particular person that's in care. Also understand that they're going to move into the honeymoon period and what that looks for them. Also understand they're going to go through the withdrawal, the wall stage, and know what it looks like for them. And also the family goes through stages themselves, so they also have to heal themselves in this process, because the user has changed the family dynamic so much. I mean, family dynamic is the way they interact, what they do together, what they don't do together, what they say, all the rules in the family. They all have been changed because of the person using drugs. And so it's really important for the family to understand that in order for the client or their loved one to continue the recovery process, they have to change. And that's the thing here. Well, they say, well, I'm not the problem, my son's a problem, fix him. Mm-hmm. That my husband's a problem. And, you know, we have to be really nice and say, okay, they are the problem. However, that because of their problem, the way your family runs itself has changed to compensate for that person being there or not there. And so the family has to learn how they compensate, how they change in order for them to move forward in the recovery process. So family members also have to change. You can't be the same persons. You can't use the same techniques. You have to let go of the resentments, of the anger, frustrations, because it's really, really important for the person in recovery to understand that you're going to go to your family with new rules, new expectations, a little bit different. That's going to help in the recovery process, help manage the wall symptoms.
Interesting. Okay. And then, so once they've kind of established this, they've moved past, they know exactly what their triggers are, they've built this healthy life there. Now it's time for them to go back into, to get a job, to move forward.
Yes, we call this stage the adjustment and resolution stage. This is a stage where a lot of individuals in recovery now are feeling accomplished, they're feeling good about themselves, they're sober for a good, maybe 5, 6 months, 7 months. And this is a stage where we either refer them to the Department of Rehabilitation to get some training. This is where actually, they might be going back to their work, or even before that, but they might be establishing maybe new careers for themselves. They have new lifestyle, new relationships. This is where everything is adjusting. They're adjusting to what's going on and they're resolving things that they had conflict with. That's what they're looking at. And this is where they maintain a balanced lifestyle. This is where they wake up a certain time, sleep a certain time, because that's a sleep hygiene. They have to wake up a certain time, eat a certain time, have the nutrients that they need. This is where they're going to get their doctor checkups, following up. Those are the things that they're doing. They're monitoring the relapse warning signs. So this is a lot of work. This recovery thing is not just like, oh, I stay sober and that's it. And this is actively doing these things, accepting that this is a long-term process. This is not just a 6-month process while I'm done and that I'm over with. And then what we recommend after they're done with their adjustment solution stages, they continue their sobriety, continue their recovery process along this. And one thing is, this is during the stages, this is about the 6th month. This is when we start actually understanding or addressing what we call underlying core issues. This is where it's really recommended for individuals to kind of address abandonment, family problems, maybe anything to do with abuse. This is where it's kind of recommended to start this process.
Okay, so then they're finally reached the adjustment stage, and now they're leading their healthy life, and they're able to really reflect, I guess, and see the core issues that are going on. And then I'm going to step back because I was going somewhere else with this, but now that we're talking about reflecting and finding out other issues. So during this time, is it best for this individual also to continue to seek treatment throughout this period?
This is where typically, if you're in a recovery program, this is where you probably would end up seeing a psychotherapist. Maybe either early on in the early stages, or either now, but somehow you're linked to a psychotherapist that has experience working with people with substance use and also other mental health issues. So that's what we're looking at. That's where you address. But one misbelief that I have to really tell people is this: is that just because you deal with things of your past, with family, long-term issues, doesn't mean you're cured. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that you address that of your life, and it decreases the likelihood of you unconsciously actually relapsing because of something you haven't worked through already. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, working through this doesn't mean it's completely resolved. It means it's up to your awareness, you understand it. So when it pops up again for you, you learn how to manage it. And so that's one thing to look at, because the brain has been affected, it has been changed, it's a disease, but it does not mean that it's cured, it's in remission. Just because you deal with this, it's like telling diabetics, a diabetic person, well, now that you resolve your mommy issues, you're cured from diabetes. It's not that's not the way it works.
Right.
It just means that you're not going to be eating emotionally anymore. It might be that you're understanding when I'm feeling really angry, stressed, something happens, I talk to someone, I know that's why I'm doing it. It gives you that relief, that connection. I could do something else healthier versus eating the chocolate bar when I'm feeling really angry when I talk to my mom, or something reminds me of what happened when I was younger. That's what the difference is. No matter what, you're still going to go through this recovery process, and it's still going to be the same, whether you deal with the core issues or not. And that's where a lot of therapists that don't have training in this, or aren't up with the research when it comes to biology of the brain science, misunderstand. I'm going to deal with their core issues and they're going to stop using. No, and that's not the way it works. You could deal with the core issues. It decreases the probability of them relapsing, but they could still go back there and relapse.
That's interesting. I like that they're addressing them, and it's not necessarily that it's gone and over with. It just now they have kind of more of a control over the matter. They know what to do and what it means, and how not to lead down the right path, or how not to let it control them anymore. Mm-hmm. So, okay, so Edgar, once we're in the recovery process, the individual is leading their sober life. They've kind of acknowledged things of their past or issues that they've dealt with, and is now what happens? Let's talk about, I guess, relapse. Is it common for relapse to happen? And I guess kind of the shame that goes with relapse. A lot of people, I feel like, don't talk about relapse because they don't want to even acknowledge it's one of those things, like, well, if I think about it, then it's going to happen, so let's just pretend it's not there.
Typically in the first year of using, there's a high likelihood of relapsing. Of course, you're on your own, you're learning new skills, you're applying them. It's very common for someone to slip. You have a family member that's in recovery. In the first year, they might have a relapse. But the important thing is not to shame them. The important thing is to help them understand what happened, get them back on track. Because relapse does not mean that you failed in recovery. Relapse means that we have to tune up your recovery. That's all it means. We have to tune it up, add more things to it, and move along. You understand how many individuals I've come across that I've done therapy with or I've done counseling with, that they relapse their first year, and then they learn from it and they don't have any more relapses, or they have very few minimal relapses. And so relapse is going to be a part of this whole recovery process. It doesn't have to be, but it is, because of the way the brain works. Some individuals are a little bit different than others, and that's just something to consider for your family members, is that sometimes along the way they're going to relapse. So don't take it as a failure. Don't take it as they don't care. Take it more as they need to add a little tune-up to the recovery. That's all this means.
And so is it important to have a relapse plan once you've maintained your sober lifestyle?
You want to have a relapse plan from the first day.
Okay.
And what I mean relapse plan from the first day is understand what are your behaviors or thoughts that are going to lead you to using. So it could be very simple as that, or it could do an all-purpose coping plan, which means given specific things they could do just in case they have thoughts. They actually run into someone that offers them where to go to their safe place, how to make a decision based on what to use, put it off to using for an hour, or call someone. So yeah, these are our relapse prevention techniques that we incorporate into their recovery process in order for them to minimize the likelihood of them relapsing, and not shaming them in the process, understanding, okay, what happened, let's work around this, let's tune this up a little bit more and get you back on track.
So that kind of leads me to my next question, Edgar. So is there a time frame on recovery, or is recovery really a lifelong process?
Recovery is a long life process. You have to do one day at a time. Because if I tell someone, this is forever, like, oh, that's a long time. I don't think I want to do forever. So one of the things to understand is something. Like 12 Steps talks about, let's keep it simple. Let's not focus on tomorrow. Let's not focus on 10 years from now. Just focus on, at this moment, I'm going to do everything I can to stay sober at this moment. Moments by moments create minutes, minutes create hours, hours create days, days create years. We're going to focus on this moment. That's all we have right now. It's being mindful that this is the most important moment. Me being in the future, me being in the past, does not help my recovery. What helps my recovery is being present at this moment. And that's one of the things we also teach is mindfulness techniques, how to be in the moment, how to be present, how to make this moment matter the most, because that's all we really have. And that's one thing they have to work with. They don't futurize what's going to happen, because that causes anxiety.
Right.
Thinking about the past causes some guilt and depression. And so we want to make sure they stay here, not to avoid these emotions, but simply understand that if they're going to stay sober and in recovery, the most important moment is now. And that's one thing we have to look at, is just now is really important.
That's great. So I kind of want to step back, and not so much just because I feel like we touched over it, but we didn't really dive into it as we did on the other topics. Can you tell me about how exactly spirituality is included in the recovery process?
Spirituality is one of the things that is been defined for many very different ways by many different people. But in essence, I'm going to put it in the terms, it's a sense of being connected to someone greater than yourself. And what I mean this connection is this connection that you are part of something greater. This sense of compassion for everyone around you, some sense of empathy and understanding and unconditional or at least acceptance, non-judgmental. These are the principles of having love for individuals, for yourself. That's the talk of spirituality we're kind of talking about. You could get that through Christ. You could get that through other forms that people go through, other form of religions that they have. So it's not we're describing one particular religion or whatnot, but we do understand that whatever that one might be for you. And that's an interesting part, because one of the things about our treatment center is that we, because of certain, laws, certain things we do, we have to have a certain regulations to how we pose that. So we try to do it in a very secular kind of way, and sometimes that could lose its meaning, but sometimes maybe that could be the first step in someone really embracing their religion, because it's kind of like a middle path, and it could lead into something more, greater for them. So that's what we talk about spirituality. It's the sense of loving your fellow man, understanding your fellow man, feeling their pain and not wanting them to have this pain, having this sense of respect for them, a sense of admiration, having a sense of gratitude. This is what the beautiful thing in recovery is going to give you, this sense of warmth, is the sense of, for some reason, being connected and realizing that we're all related in some form of another. And that's the spirituality that we're talking about, that usually gain within a few months, 6 months to a year afterwards, where we get through all the other barriers that come along with this. But that's kind of what we want to reach to, is this sense of that we're a community and we need to help each other out. And that's kind of what we're striving for when it comes to the spirituality aspect of it. And can you measure that for yourself? Yeah, you can measure it for yourself. You could give yourself a scale of 1 to 25, and you could use your own self. Okay, where do I think I am in this area? Am I? And then you kind of go from there. But that's the spirituality aspect of recovery.
That's beautiful. So it's really helping that person to learn how to be more compassionate and understanding towards individuals, and just, I guess, be a happier person and kind of be one with themselves.
Yeah, and then what happens is a lot of individuals then start embracing God. They start embracing this, because sometimes also another thing in recovery that I haven't discussed today is addressing that anger towards religion, towards God. Because if God was so great and mighty, why do I have this addiction? Why did they take this away from me? So, and also in recovery, we have to address that. What are the barriers for you getting back into a good relationship with your Lord? What is it? What's getting in the way? Because sometimes we don't realize that, but that gets in the way of things. And that could get in the way of them communicating with others, talking with others, and having that sense of calmness that comes along with spirituality. So that's also an important part of recovery, is addressing that, and also linking them to spiritual advisors, reverends, priests, whoever they want to go to consult with. It's really important, because spirituality not only brings this, but also brings a lot of great coping skills. Their ability to handle life, add meaning to their life, have a sense of purpose. All that's part of spirituality, and that's one of the things that we have to look at. And we could do a whole segment on spirituality and recovery, because it's a really important concept to understand, and a lot of individuals sometimes don't grasp that. What does that mean? Because it's not a tangible thing. It's something you kind of have to believe without seeing. Right. And we live in a society where if it doesn't, it's not there, then it's not true. And so that's one thing when it comes to spirituality and recovery. It's a good topic to actually bring in light and bring some individuals to kind of talk about this. It's a really important topic to talk about.
That's wonderful. So Edgar, is there anything else that you'd like to add to the recovery process that we kind of maybe didn't hit on?
Once they're done with treatment, once they're done with everything else, they continue their lifestyle. I really recommend for them to keep connected to either a home group. What we call a home group is a 12-step meeting where they go at least minimum once a month, to individuals that they know, to, or at least once every 2 weeks, to keep connected, be of service, be volunteering, use the same practice skills that were given to them, or continue their alumni group. Wherever treatment center they go to, there's alumni groups. Be part of their alumni group. Come and visit them. Be of service to individuals that are coming into treatment. That's what keep giving back. Keep giving back, because it's important to stay connected. It's a good reinforcer to understand where you at, where I'm at now, and where I'm heading. And recovery is a lifelong process. And it's a thing what I tell people, you have to market your recovery. You have to advocate your recovery. You have to let them know that you're in sobriety, that you're in recovery, and there's no shame in it. There's actually true great honor and self-control that comes along with being in recovery. It's a thing of greatness. And every individual that has done something great has fallen in some form or another. So the one thing I do recommend is let people know, no, I'm not drinking because I am in recovery, or I'm not drinking because I don't want to drink. And that's kind of thing is really important, is educating others around you by living it. Because if see you living it, that's the better indicator that they want to know how did you do it. So I recommend people to live their recovery, breathe their recovery, embrace their recovery. Because if you do that, it's going to be a really great process and great lifestyle that you're going to have.
That's great. There you go. Live, breathe, and embrace your recovery. So Edgar went over the recovery process and the different kind of steps as it relates to withdrawal and the honeymoon phase, the wall that the individuals are going to hit, and then as they go into their new lifestyle, the adjustment and resolution part. And also along the way, they receive a lot of education on the topic and learning about the recovery process and how to avoid their triggers and to recognize these symptoms. And then we also want to remember to continue the care after by going to a group home, or a home group twice a month, or staying connected in some way or some form, and really helping to move yourself forward and leading through example. Did I kind of capture everything, Edgar?
You did a great job.
Does that? Thank you so much for going over the recovery process today with us.
And one of the things I also want to add, last thing is if some reason you want some information, give us a call. We're 877-293-0722 and talk to one of our trained professionals that might help you. If you don't call us, call someone. Just get some information, go online, and just get the information that you need. It's always better to talk to someone in person, live, ask the questions. So I really highly recommend that if you have a loved one in recovery, to get educated in what the recovery process looks like. That way you could help your loved one have a better success or greater opportunity for them to reach full sobriety and full recovery.
There you go. Call Crossroads Recovery Center today or call someone in your local area. Thank you again for joining us. Have a great night and God bless.